carried out yesterday. 201,101 people have tested positive. That's an increase of 6,111 cases since yesterday. 13,615 people are currently in hospital with coronavirus in Great Britain, down from 13,922 yesterday. And sadly, of those hospitalised with the virus, 30,076 have now died. That's an increase of 649 fatalities since yesterday. Behind those numbers are heartbreaking losses for the loved ones of all those who've died. And once again, our thoughts and our prayers are with their friends and their families. Professor Doyle will provide an update on the latest data on coronavirus. But first, as Communities Secretary, I'd like to take this opportunity to give an update on the work being done locally during the pandemic to keep people safe, to provide support for people's jobs and their businesses, and to prepare for the reopening and the recovery of our local economies. That's why it's appropriate that this afternoon we're joined by regional journalists who are doing so much to keep people informed about how the national effort is being coordinated in our own communities. A free country needs a free press, and the national, the regional and the local newspapers of our country are under significant financial pressure. I'd like to echo the words of the Culture Secretary recently in encouraging everyone who can to buy a newspaper. As I've said before, the battle against coronavirus will be won in every city, in every town and every village across the country. This is truly a national effort, and it's a national effort taking place at a local level. My department, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, has played a vital role in bringing people together to tackle the virus. We've provided local authorities with over £3.2 billion during this pandemic so that they can continue to support the communities that need it through this most challenging time and respond to the immediate pressures they are facing due to coronavirus, whilst also protecting and preserving vital public services. At the start of March, I established a task force to support local resilience forums, known as LRFs, standing them up at a local level across the country to prepare each and every community for a range of different scenarios. There are 38 LRFs in England, which are made up of emergency services, a range of government agencies, health bodies and local authorities. They're headed by some of the most senior and experienced local leaders of the emergency services, of councils, the NHS and others who together are leading their communities through the crisis with the full support of central government. Recognising the unprecedented challenge that we faced, I took the decision to embed within them some of the finest military planners in the world from our armed forces, and I'm very grateful for their hard work in recent weeks. This combined expertise and leadership is ensuring a comprehensive, coordinated and consistent response across the country. Responding to the urgent need for personal protective equipment to reach the front line of the care sector, we've mobilised LRFs to help distribute PPE, and thus far they've delivered over 67 million items in England alone since early April. Together with local councils, they're also assisting us in supporting some of the most vulnerable individuals in their communities. And to date, they've helped us to ensure that 1 million boxes of food and essential supplies have now been delivered to those people identified by the NHS as extremely clinically vulnerable to coronavirus, the shielded. With more than 290,000 boxes being distributed every week, this has been a huge team effort, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone involved for the role that they've played and will play in the weeks ahead. We're also working very closely with mayors to make sure that we have a coordinated approach to tackling coronavirus at a local level. The government has been determined to ensure that the vital work of keeping people safe in their homes also continues. So with the support of the mayors of London, of the Liverpool City region, of Greater Manchester, of Sheffield, of the West Midlands, and others, we were able to announce the Building Safety Pledge. These mayors have come together because they have a number of the high-rise buildings with highly flammable cladding in their respective regions. And the pledge that we agreed sends a very clear message that vital building safety work must continue, despite the coronavirus pandemic. And we've been joined by 25 local authorities, including 18 in London, who've also given their fulsome support. As work on many of these critical sites was paused early on, it's now slowly starting to reassume as a result of this initiative. And I would urge any building owner or contractor to do so as soon as practical, where it's safe to begin work once again. Now, coronavirus will not stop our mission to level up, to unite and to unleash the potential of this country. The Prime Minister will set out on Sunday our approach to the second phase of this pandemic. And as we look ahead to supporting businesses as they're able to reopen, my department will lead our work on how our local economies can adapt, evolve, recover and grow. I will continue to support mayors and local government leaders who will play a critical role in this work. Every local economy now needs a plan to restart and recover. We will be informing these plans with our own detailed work in areas such as how workplaces, from factories to construction sites to offices, can be adapted, how outdoor spaces, leisure and businesses, from parks to high streets to markets, can be managed, and how public transport networks, from the tube to trams to buses, can operate. In each case, guided by scientific and medical advice, we want to ensure appropriate and safe social distancing, providing the public with the confidence to return to work and to return to public spaces and public transport, knowing that it's always safe to do so. We're considering how we can create more room in town centres for pedestrians, how we can make it easier to cycle or walk to work. And we'll work with towns and places whose economies have been hardest hit intensively as the recovery begins. And our commitment to infrastructure investment remains undimmed. For example, over 2/3 of HS2 sites are open. We want infrastructure and construction work to begin again, wherever it's safe to do so. It's clear to everyone that the pandemic is putting huge pressure on economies the world over, and there's no denying the challenges that lie ahead in our own country. But we cannot and will not let this pandemic halt our work to improve connectivity, to provide vital social and cultural infrastructure, and to boost economic growth across the regions. That is how we'll begin to rebuild and to recover from this national emergency. We're working to ensure the right support is available to local businesses. And last week, high street businesses began to receive the £22 billion package designed to mitigate some of the effects of coronavirus, with grants of up to £25,000 being paid into bank accounts of those businesses. And of course, our 100 towns benefiting from the £3.6 billion Towns Fund will continue to receive our support, and we'll be working at pace with them in the months ahead. Local authorities have now paid out over £8.6 billion in grants to around 700,000 businesses. As Local Government Secretary, I'd like to congratulate those councils who've worked extremely hard, sometimes around the clock, to get those grants out to the businesses that desperately need them. I'd like to congratulate Chichester, Ealing and Hyndburn councils, who are the 3 highest performing councils so far in England. Businesses are also receiving discounts of almost £10 billion on their rates bills in response to COVID-19, with the hardest hit by the pandemic, such as shops, cafes and pubs, paying no business rates whatsoever this financial year. Together with existing reliefs, this means that 1.1 million ratepayers are no longer paying business rates this year. This week, the Chancellor and I announced an additional 5% uplift, up to £617 million, available to local councils to fund small businesses that rent space in shared offices, industrial units and innovation centres, as well as market traders, B&Bs that pay council tax rather than business rates, and also to support small charities. And local councils will now have more flexibility to make pragmatic decisions to keep those businesses going so they can bounce back once they're able to do so. Moving forward, our mission is to ensure everything we can is done to help people to get back to work safely, to reunite friends and family, and to reintroduce the things that make life worth living in a safe way as soon as it's safe to do so. Finally, on Friday, we will be celebrating as a country the 75th anniversary of VE Day. My department, like others, had been helping to plan some of the public celebrations, but we know that, sadly, we'll now need to mark this important occasion from home instead. Cabinet colleagues have been speaking with veterans organised by the Royal British Legion. I had the pleasure earlier this week of speaking to Leslie, a 98-year-old World War II veteran, on the phone. Leslie was full of warmth and wisdom, telling me how he spent VE Day in Siena, having fought his way through North Africa and Italy, and how he would be spending Friday more sedately celebrating at home. He said to me that as we rebuilt and we recovered then, he's certain that we'll do so again this year. I'll now hand over to Dr. Kanani in the first instance, and then to Professor Doyle. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary of State. And I wanted to just reflect on your point about community and thank communities for following government advice at an incredibly difficult time. I'm a GP, and before I was a GP, I grew up in a community pharmacy, and my colleagues have been facing probably the most challenging time they've ever had to. And right across the NHS, people are working under significant stress and strain. And our communities have helped to look after them and look out for them through staying at home and following government advice and becoming volunteer responders and looking out for their own communities. So I want to thank you for that. It's really challenging, isn't it? I have a family member who's shielding. I'm homeschooling children, and it feels difficult, and we all want reassurance, and we miss the familiarity of the things that we always used to do. But I wanted to reassure people who are listening and watching today that your primary care services are still there for you. I want to pay tribute to our GP practices and our general practice teams, our dentists, our optometrists, the unsung heroes, the community pharmacists on the high street who've continued to work day after day and make sure that they're there for you. This bank holiday, they'll be open as well. And it might feel a little bit different. You might have more telephone calls or online consultations. You might see somebody dressed in PPE, as I was yesterday in my surgery. But you must know that your NHS is still here for you. So please come and contact us if you need advice or support over the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I think we all want to reiterate your comments and the thanks to GPs and everybody working in primary care across the country. I'll now turn over to Yvonne, who's going to present today's slides.
Thank you, Secretary of State. So just to remind us all of the 5 tests for adjusting the lockdown here, we can see that they relate to capacity and to mortality, to deaths, and also that we are actually controlling the epidemic itself and the transmission of the epidemic. So looking at the first graph here, please, the next slide. We can see again that this is about transport. It's a regular slide. It shows that overall transport use is down a good bit, by 50%, but less so for motor vehicles. And that has been slowly increasing over recent weeks. And this is up to the 4th of May, and it's for the UK. Could I have the next slide, please? The important message in all that, of course, is that we must still respect that this virus does transmit, and to stay at home and not to interact too much, because people are still very vulnerable to getting this virus. Now, we can see here the daily tests, and these have increased over time, and this is up to the 6th of May. But I will move on really to the next slide, which is of interest, which is the new cases. And here we have more new cases, and this may be a matter of concern, but of course it's also a matter of testing more. So we are doing more testing, and therefore we will find more cases, and this is what we want to do. We want to find the positive cases so that we can break transmission. So on to the next one, please, and this is about people in hospital. I know of great interest to you listening, and the news here is generally very good. You can see where London had its early epidemic, and it has declined. The cases in hospital have declined, as more slowly perhaps have other regions. And we see here where the Northwest has now has more cases in hospital than London, but overall we have about 13,000 cases, which is a decrease, and it's good news. And then if we can just look at the most critically ill patients, and this is about critical care beds use throughout the UK, and this is again good news. It's for the 4 countries of the UK, and we can see here where we actually have less than a third of critical care beds being occupied by people with the coronavirus. So good news there, it is declining. And then we look at the recorded deaths. Less good news here in terms of these are very tragic. It is very, very sad. But the trend is good, because it is slowly coming down. And this is a 7-day rolling average for the UK. And as has been said, we have 649 yesterday, and that was a decline, a slow decline. And then finally, 2 slides about the international deaths. So the first one is just the crude numbers. And this, of course, depends on the size of the country. So we have, over 67,000 deaths in the United States, but of course, a big country. And we can see the UK and the European countries there further down. But if we look at the last slide, which is about the rates per million population, then we have taken account of the size of the country.